From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
My oath we do, Chris. Kiss the ground for me and I'll do the same for you here. Yes, the man cave has been dragged to Adelaide tonight because our trip from Port Lincoln, I won't bore you with the finer details, but I can tell you this, it was very long. There was many a delay. In fact, Adelaide Airport was shut down for a little while today because of lightning strikes, which meant getting back there and then back to the man cave, not possible. So here we are in Adelaide tonight, looking forward to a normal show, nothing different other than where we look into a camera rather than you looking at the TV. All right, let's get straight to it, including to far north Queensland right now, where lots of people are worried about Cyclone Jasper. Now, it's been building for the past couple of days. There's a chance it will hit very late tomorrow or into Wednesday. We are now looking down the barrel of a pretty significant event, which will be between Cooktown in the north, all the way down potentially to Townsville. As we speak, as this beast is moving its way, lots of people getting ready, as you can see, all types of people getting ready for this. I want to show you the latest map that we have about exactly the type of area we are talking here. I repeat again, we are talking about, from Mackay, Townsville, Cairns. You can see that that's going to be the effects. But between Cooktown and Cairns is where most likely this thing's going to hit. As you can see in your top left-hand corner, that's about what time things get really bad in the very early hours of Wednesday morning. For a little more, here is Sky News Weather, who are, of course, in rolling coverage.
Winds near the centre of a cyclone can reach up to 280 kilometres per hour. At this point, branches are tearing off trees, becoming flying missiles, and most of these shops are not in a good way. Awnings are getting ripped off. Watch out! Life-threatening flash flooding can also strike at this point, as rivers of water are now rushing through our town. Most dangerous of all, storm surge and high tides that can swamp coastal regions, moving many kilometres inland. And then, all at once, calm returns. But do not be deceived. This is the eye of a severe tropical cyclone. Winds are light and the skies are clear. But this brief lull will soon be replaced by more destructive winds coming in from the other direction, continuing to wreak havoc until the cyclone moves inland and weakens.
I'm telling you, the Weather Channel, you've got to check it out, Sky News Weather. But how good is that? I'm slightly stunned here because, as you can see, the production budget is just amazing on Paul Murray Live. Over there on the Weather Channel, it's smick, it's fantastic. You can watch it all in HD. Of course, if you're on Flash or any of the other ways that we see it, you'll see plenty of options there. But our thoughts with the people of North Queensland. I'll get to the politics, don't worry. But as always, when people are in danger, I want to hear from them first, no matter where I am.
We'll get ahead and we'll see what it does. A bit early to say whether it's going to go over the top of us.
Water will come over and may go down through the garage there, and hopefully the sandbags will keep it out of the house.
My husband's practice is just in the city, so it always gets flooded with king tide. So we're just going to sandbag across the front.
I've never been through one, so yeah, I'm concerned for sure. Hopefully go through this thing unscathed, but prepare for the worst.
Strength and love to everyone who's being affected by that and is worried about what is taking place. Please pay attention to the latest warnings that you get. Now, before I get to the immigration politics of the day, and geez, what a surprise. All of the people that are desperate to try to breathe life into the federal government, well, they all fell for a bit of a pup today. But before we get there, our old mate Airbus Albo, I've got a bit of an update for you here. Airbus Albo, as we know, the Prime Minister who loves flying overseas because apart from anything else, it's a little bit of a distraction from how bad things are going at home. It's also an opportunity for him to get the red carpet treatment, no matter where he ends up, to be treated like a world leader as opposed to a Prime Minister that a few Australians have got a bit of voting regret over. It's an opportunity for him to slide, oh, g'day, mate, how are you? G'day, buddy, to the Chinese president, which hopefully will turn into a few more votes this time next. You get the point. And, of course, the reality is that Australians have been watching on. They're not impressed by the Airbus Albo Act. In fact, as you know, latest news poll says this thing is 50-50. People are telling the Prime Minister that he needs to sharpen up, get onto things. And in actual fact, we ended up learning in the past little while that this bloke has, been spending more time speaking overseas than he has publicly. Unbelievable. A number of press conferences, literally more of them that he has done abroad than he has actually done here. Now, of course, when it comes to private jet use, he is the Prime Minister, but the Deputy Prime Minister is really trying to squeeze every dollar he possibly can, the frequent free flyer Richard Marles. Remember the frequent free flyer Richard Marles? who tells you, the taxpayer, to shh, national security, because he has to have private jets, not to his nearest major capital airport in Melbourne. No, he's got to go to Avalon because it's a little bit closer to where he lives in Geelong. Sort of mystery about where he lives, by the way. That's where he's a local MP. Of course, he up against the wall, how many $1,000 to fly from the Labor Party conference in Brisbane to the Matildas playing in Sydney to turn around to go back to the Labor Party conference. You know, national security stuff. Well, as we know, all of this is about trying to spend other people's money, something that they very much enjoy in the Labor Party, and certainly at the front end of the plane when you have a private plane. It's other people's money. It's paid for by somebody else. Who cares? It's free, right? No, of course, it's you and me. And one of the reasons why this sort of irks people is, of course, because of the cost of living crisis. You know the data, you know the details, you're living it right now. But there's a little element here that I had to follow up on from our normal conversation about Airbus Albo, and not just the politics of spending more time overseas than he does in Australia, in terms of his happy thoughts are clearly not in the country of which he is employed to be the leader. No, let's talk about Toto. Now, of course, the Prime Minister's dog, beyond question, and nobody is attacking a dog. Let's be very clear. But what we are talking about is, of course, this secret weapon that the Prime Minister has used to rally votes and remind us of just how cuddly and wonderful he is. And the Prime Minister, as we know, he loves parading around this dog. You know, the sort of stuff that makes you look like a serious world leader. Not a bloke who's just house-sitting for somebody else. Of course, this was just last week in Canberra, when the Prime Minister's puppy made it to the photo with all of the people who are running the country. You know, the premiers. This photo, of course, goes out of date on Friday, but the premiers and the chief ministers, and Toto, who I think the Prime Minister thinks is a metaphor for the Australian people. They never speak back, and they always heel boy when the time is needed. Well, Samantha Maiden, who has been front and centre on Richard Marles and how he spends your money on flights, and the Prime Minister on how much is happening with his private jets, well, she's found the documents. She's found the receipts. The Toto is flying on the Prime Ministerial jet. Now, people have previously said that the Prime Minister apparently jokes that it's Toto One, like Air Force One, because, you know, Toto's awesome. And I'm sure he is not the first Prime Minister to have flown around with a dog on a private jet. But in the same way, just because you're allowed to do it doesn't mean you should do it. It's one of those things that I remember John Howard talking about the Lodge or Kirribilli House. He said, this is not my house. This is a house that I get to stay in because of the job. Conversely, if you're the Prime Minister, you try to use the private jets for as little as possible, and you don't take pets with you. Now, you might be allowed to, but of course it's a weird look. Again, Samantha Maiden and her reporting on all of this is fascinating because while the Prime Minister is entitled to take his dog, and apparently other Prime Ministers have done it, we are now starting to learn one of the reasons why we can't know exactly how many flights Toto has been on. You see, according to, again, Samantha Maiden, globetrotting Anthony Albanese's rung up $5 million for VIP flights since he was elected. That's about $88,000 a week. Now, remember, his private flights aren't just between Sydney, LA, Sydney, Washington, Sydney, London. It's, of course, Canberra, Sydney, Canberra, Canberra, Melbourne, Melbourne, Adelaide. You know, you get the point. Confirming that the Prime Minister's dog has also been on the taxpayer-funded VIP plane follows his team's refusal to respond to questions about whether the dog was travelling on the aircraft for 3 months. So the Prime Minister's people know that he does it. The Prime Minister's people know that it's going to be a bad look because it's kind of taking the proverbial. But instead, it was what this Prime Minister did. Again, he's allowed to do it, but should he do it? Probably not. Somebody was trying to tell me today, but the dog frets. I don't care. I don't care. I think it's a bad look no matter whom the Prime Minister is. Now, interestingly in all of this, the Defence Department says that all of this is to do with national security, about why you can't know whether the Prime Minister takes a dog on a plane that you pay for. This gets a bit complicated, but let me explain it this way. This is an official note which was sent to Samantha Maiden via the Defence Department. I formed the view that the relevant material contained in the documents is exempt under Section 33A-I of the FOI Act. You see, this is when the journalist asks a government official, can you give us the information? They write back and say no. For what reason? Well, this is the reason. Because it would reasonably disclose patterns of travel, including destinations. Now, this, of course, is a whole bunch of garbage that if terrorists worked it out, they'd be able to work out that the Prime Minister, whose electorate is in Sydney, travels to Sydney a lot. Or the Prime Minister, who lives at a place called the Lodge in Canberra, flies to Canberra a lot. Or the Prime Minister, who, if he does fly to here in Adelaide or goes to Brisbane or goes to the back of Bourke, All of these things, if known by a foreign enemy, would somehow be dangerous to national security. The only problem is he appears in the media every place he goes. One of the reasons the Prime Minister gets off their backside and actually leaves Canberra is so they can take photos in the local area of which they are going. There is no mystery about the movements of the Prime Minister. But this is being used by the government that promised to be more open and transparent to hide really simple information that not a lot of people are going to care about, that doesn't change anyone's life, but gives us a little insight into the man and the bloke and how he is taking advantage of the top job, whether he views it as a privilege, whether it feels like you're wearing somebody else's shoes or a crown that goes from Prime Minister to Prime Minister, or whether he thinks that it's his plane, it's his house, and he can do whatever he wants with it. Now, believe it or not, this stuff continues. Further, the release of this information could reasonably be expected to allow the anticipation of future patterns of movement, therefore placing risk and safety of members of Parliament. Are you serious? It's a question from a journalist about, does the Prime Minister take a dog with him when he flies between his house in Canberra, his house in Sydney, or where we see him on the news anywhere else in the country? This would adversely impact and cause damage to the security of the Commonwealth. Really? This is ridiculous. And an insight into, again, people who told us they were better than this, people who told us that they would be more transparent, more open, more accessible. If they're doing this about something as insignificant as whether Toto's on the plane, what are they really hiding from us? Good luck to any journalist who's trying to have a look. But sometimes it's the silly stories that give us an indication about just how bad some of the people are and about how secretive they truly are when they get a chance to run the country. I wonder what Albo would have said about this if he was opposition leader. Meantime, today, as you know, immigration, migration, number of people coming to the country has been an issue for quite some time. Why? Because the reality is that you know that most of the stuff that you pay for in the state government, well, it doesn't work. There's also too many people that are trying to get into it. We're talking about everything from the O system to finding a place for your kid or their sibling to be able to make it into a public school. We know that there aren't enough houses for the people who are on top of the 25 million people who live here already. And again, can I say, for those that are half listening, I don't have a problem with whence people come or what they believe or what they look like. That's not my issue. My issue is that the facilities that exist for the current 25 million people isn't up to standard of the 21st century. In places like regional Queensland, the rental lines are now so long, it's about 120 people to have a look at a place in Ipswich, or in Melbourne, if you're lucky enough to get the chance to rent a room in somebody else's house, that could cost you $400 a week. You introduce more people with fewer houses, guess what happens? The price goes up. And as we know, Australians have been very clear, and every poll tells us this, that the number of people being brought into the country not to improve the lifestyle of the country or to make you or I feel more comfortable, instead to pump up the bottom line of the budget, to make big business more happy. Well, surprise, surprise, another poll tells us here 62% of people say the current amount is just too high. But this government has got it wrong, exactly as we know for the past 18 months and every day since they came to power. They have got it wrong. Oh, it was all about being apparently post-COVID. But what they really wanted to do was to supercharge a scenario where they could say, we've got a surplus, the other guys don't. So therefore, bring them in, bring them in, bring them in. But as we've talked about, there's a consequence when all of that happens. Now, amazingly, apparently one of the solutions to the government's problems that have been caused by, among others, clueless Claire O'Neill, today was more Claire O'Neill. What do they say about the definition of insanity? Now, as you know, media got very excited today because they're cutting the migration numbers. The government is starting to listen, I think I read on the TV.
The federal government has revealed what it calls ambitious reforms to bring migrant numbers under control.
The Albanese government is tonight promising an overhaul of Australia's migration system will help ease the burden on cost of living and improve our services sector.
International students will undergo tougher English language tests, so-called ghost colleges shut down, and a new skills in demand visa created to fill critical jobs. Applicants fast-tracked within 7 days, not months.
But guess what? All of it's spin. Yes, there are a few less people, but you've got to send out a search party way beyond the horizon. Way beyond the horizon. to be able to actually see when these numbers start to kick in. You see, government always does things in about 4 or 5 year bands. Generally speaking, governments that have no money turn around and say that something big they're going to build or tax cut they're going to deliver is often the never, never, because really they can just promise it but hope it never gets delivered. That's exactly what happened today, and the media fell for it. As my colleague James Morrow went through in some detail, and did it far better than I'm going to, but I will anyway, because we both had the same idea, which was to show you what this government's projections were about the number of people coming into the country. All right? Have a look at this. In 2022-23, we're talking financial years here, 400,000 people were due to come to the country. Then it was 315,000, 260,000 people. The reality, of course, they promised 400,000, they ended up delivering 510,000. They promised 315,000, they ended up delivering 375,000 people. So quick, let's find a cut. Next year supposed to be 260, well that now becomes 250. The next year supposed to be 260, that's now 255. Wow. And 15,000 people. And then the next year, when of course we're off into the never, never, we've been re-elected and it won't matter, 260 becomes 235. Or let me put it this way. If you put together the projections from 2022 to 2027, that's about 1.4 million people that are supposed to be coming into Australia by June 30, 2027. When you actually put together what has happened in the past couple of years, plus the little cut here, a little cut there, guess what? It's 1.6 billion people. So they turn around and despite the fact that they have delivered way more people in the past couple of years, including the full year they've been in control of the federal budget, where the projections were for 23-24, remember, it was 315,000. The delivery ended up being more than 500,000 people. So they can afford to say they're cutting now because they've already pre-delivered it. But they think you're stupid. And they know that the press gallery desperately wants to save an underperforming government, desperately wants to pretend they are doing something about a problem like cost of living. Now, of course, what they could do for this is, yes, a little bit on immigration, but they can do way more than this. This stuff, dare I say, doesn't really touch the sides. What they, of course, could be doing is cutting fuel tax, cutting the heavy haulage taxes, and making serious investments that would improve the cost effectiveness of the energy grid. All of those things bring down cost of living, pretending you're doing something about the overall immigration picture, when the reality is that you want credit for the people who haven't turned up here, but you don't want to be punished for the people who already have turned up here. For her part, Claire O'Neill thinks this is amazing.
Our goal is to return migration to sustainable levels.
Today we are announcing a strategy for a better, fairer and a more sustainable migration system.
The way they spin, right? Remember, these are two very problematic ministers. They're two of the three useless amigos. Yet they're now being used to spin that everything is awesome and everything is changing. When the reality is the damage has already been done. What they have over-delivered is what they are now going to pretend to cut back on ever so slightly, meaning when you actually pile the two numbers together, you still end up with 200,000 more people. You see, you lose no matter which way it happens. And if anywhere between 1.5 and about 2 million people end up turning up to the country, guess how many people that is? The entire city that I'm sitting in right now in Adelaide in South Australia. That's the plan between now and 2027. Remember, the plan, this government, unaltered, is that by the 2060s, we're going to end up with 40 to 45 million people. They are doing nothing. Oh, and by the way, the polls that were taken, yes, before the announcement, but still ahead of all of the leaking of it, 55% of people still think the numbers that have been put forward by the government today are still too high. What a giant surprise that normal people can see when the wool's trying to be pulled over their eyes, when somebody is trying to BS them directly to their face. Let's talk about Queensland. Now, as you know, the countdown is on to the greatest Queensland Queen, Palaszczuk's stepping down her abdication, before she will, of course, go off into the cold bosom that is just a normal, very emotional, private life. Now, of course, yesterday she was crying, but let's not muck around here. She was pushed. She did not choose to resign. She was pushed. Now, we know this because we can all spot a bad actor. But secondly, because how many times did she say this?
Returning to the Tower of Power, wasting no time in making one thing clear.
I feel refreshed, I feel energised, and I'm absolutely determined to lead the party and this government to the next election.
Will you be staying on as the leader, Premier?
Absolutely.
Is it selfish for you to remain on as leader?
Well, we know that the only poll that counts is on election day.
So she didn't plan to go anywhere. They were expecting her, of course, to be turning around and running all the way to the election. But she's gone because union bosses did private polling and it showed she was going to lose the next election. But what I love particularly about why I think Anastasia Palaszczuk was crying on Sunday was because she really didn't have any plan for the people of Queensland, but she had a plan for herself. You see, the election is due about October next year, but there's something that's happening in May of next year that she was desperately trying to hold on for. And that was to beat Peter Beattie's record as the longest-serving Labor Premier. And yes, she will be the most successful female politician in Australian history with all of her continuous wins. But still, guess what? She's not going to be the longest-serving Labor Premier, which is just going to send her nuts for a very long period of time, metaphorically, of course. All right, I want to take an early break now because the great Nigel Farage, we haven't spoken to him for way too long. And in actual fact, he is out of the jungle in Queensland. He will join us from the Gold Coast, where he was having his first pint in a few weeks after being in the UK version of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
Right, so here is a big shout out to Paul Murray from the lads. Paul Murray, cheers! Love you, Paul!
On your boys, but first the debate is next. We are right into it tonight. We'll get into it with James Ashby, Holly Hughes, Nicholas Rees. Had to double check, but I'm exactly where I need to be. Your place tonight. Send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au. Want to see. All right, Nigel Farage in a couple of minutes. Let us get into a conversation right now to show we are a truly national program. As you know, Man Cave is in Adelaide tonight. Of course, James Ashby, who will be running for the Queensland Parliament. We'll get into that in a couple of minutes. He's, of course, joining us in Queensland. Joining us, I think, in Sydney is none other than lovely Holly Hughes and the equally lovely Nicholas Rees joining us in Melbourne. We've got the map, the lap of the map covered here. I love it. All right. Now, we'll get into things in a second here. But, Holly, I'll start with you. Now, again, the government plays that little trick today, like they were sort of a performer saying, hey, guess the P, where's the P, where's the P? Sort of the little game happening on the side of the road today, pretending that they were doing something serious about immigration. Here's the deal. As I pointed out, their projections previously were 1.4 million. They have over-delivered on those, which means even after they've cut, we're still going to end up with 1.6 million, which is more than the city of Adelaide. Nice try, but if anyone's actually paying attention, nothing's changing.
No, and we've been talking about in Parliament for quite a period of time the fact that inflation, which is what this immigration is fueling, that the inflation is now so heavily homegrown. It is now demand-side driven inflation because of this influx of new migrants. This has been conversations that we have been wanting to have, that have been shut down and shut down and shut down by this completely arrogant government, but yet we leave Parliament on Thursday and by Saturday, Albanese has some epiphany and starts to make policy announcement. I mean, you know, maybe congrats to Albo. I think it's the first policy he's actually discussed on Australian soil since before the referendum. So, you know, perhaps we could give him some chutzpah for that. But, I mean, it's an absolute joke. They refuse to accept it's demand-side inflation that is driving all of these cost of living pressures at the moment, which are being absolutely put forward by this immigration. And as we know with Labor, they have a very poor record when it comes to targeted immigration. We know that we need doctors in the bush. We need a lot of skilled workers in rural and regional Australia, yet they do not have targeted immigration policies. They open the floodgate. Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane became the hotspots for everyone that turns up in the country and create more and more of a housing issue, more and more inflation, and do not solve any of the skills gaps we have in rural and regional Australia.
Completely. Now, Nicholas, I'll get to you in a second about students, because that's sort of this big part of it, and I understand what the university sector is as an industry, but when it comes to human beings needing places to live, well, that's part of the issue we've talked about before when it comes to housing. But James, again, look, maybe I'm the fellow who can't add up, but seriously, I mean, what a perfect example about a bunch of people sitting around looking at a whiteboard going, geez, we've had a bad couple of weeks. How do we make it look like we're doing something? Well, let's turn around and pretend that we're going to cut into the future when we have already over-delivered in the past. And you know what? Everyone in the media fell for it today.
Well, in Queensland here, the state government are running ads saying we're increasing our population here in Queensland by 1 million people over the next 10 years. The problem is we're going to build more houses, and roughly about 40,000 per year to try and keep up with that increase. Now, we're already short, all right, on houses in this state. So 40,000 is the bare minimum. Last year, we had 38,000 housing approvals. So we're already falling short. We don't have enough builders. We don't have enough tradesmen in general right across the country, let alone here in Queensland. So I don't know how they're going to keep up with that. Now, this false promise they're going to reduce the numbers, they may have reduced, or they're going to claim they're going to reduce on one hand, but Paul, there have been in the last few months, 4 months, more than 200,000 applications from Afghans who have fled Afghanistan after Taliban took back over. They've made an application to come to Australia. Now, the Australian authorities are slowly working through those. Does that mean Albanese's going to tear up every one of those 200,000? I hope so, but I bet he doesn't. He will continue to bring in on different streams. So when I say different streams, it'll be migration through humanitarian entry levels. So this is all just puff and win from a Prime Minister who's desperate to try and get the Australian public back on his side.
Yeah, completely. Now, I've got to say, we're all in 4 different places. There might be slight, as they used to say, satellite delays. So as much as we'd love to interrupt each other, particularly if our next speaker is about to say what I think he's about to say, just hold your horses. Everyone will have a go in a second. Nicholas, you may be the one who sits the cat amongst the pigeons. Of course, we know that you've worked in the university sector for a long time, and we know how valuable it is, as we say, third biggest export, all the rest of it. But is there not a problem here where, OK, if insert university wants to bring in 5,000 overseas students, that's fine, but why shouldn't that university have 5,000 places for them to live on campus? Because if they bring in 5,000 extra people, that's competing with everyone else. That's 5,000 more people trying to find a rental unit, insert city. What's wrong with my logic here, and how do we fix this? Because I get the value of the product, but if it creates more demand on what the public is looking for in services, then we have a problem.
Well, look, universities are really good at educating people, and they're really good at undertaking research in this country. They undertake world-leading research. Probably not their expertise, housing, building houses and running student accommodation. Yes, they do a little bit of it, but that's not their specialty. And then, in a capitalist economy, you basically get the people who specialise in doing certain things to do those things in the economy. So let's let the universities focus on what they do well, educating, teaching and research, and let others, the housing sector, look after the accommodation of these people. I actually think the reforms today were pretty good, pretty sensible. Lifting the English language standard test, that's needed to be done. Cracking down on these ghost colleges, essentially dodgy education providers, needs to be done. Really tougher regulations around the education agents as well, who connect the students overseas to the universities and other education institutions here in Australia. That all needs to be tightened up, and so I think the government's done the right thing here. But I just want to go back to a little bit of Ashby economics that we heard from James earlier. He told us, on the one hand, we needed to stop the immigrants because they were causing problems in the housing market. But then in the next breath, he told us that you can't get builders. You can't get people to work on the building sites to build the houses. Now, in the good old days, James, we used to bring people in this country and they'd help build the houses. So I'm just interested to know how you explain...
You were Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister at the time when you actually cut it. You're the problem. You're the problem. Labor cut all of those apprenticeship programs. I believe the number was 300,000 when you were in government, Nicholas. So take some responsibility for it. One Nation actually put together a program to increase the apprenticeship numbers. When we held the balance of power in the last 2 terms of government, we forced that through the Morrison government. You guys slashed it. And guess what? You're doing nothing but bringing hopeless tradespeople into the country from other countries that just don't have the same level of standards as what we do. You're to blame.
All right, let a host host here. I shall do so now in terms of what's happening in Queensland and the scenario there in and around the new Premier, whether or not it's going to be Stephen Miles. Now, Stephen Miles, of course, former Deputy Premier. The assumption was of the current Premier that it'd be a nice little deal and he'd become the Premier. Only problem is, people know that Stephen Miles ain't that popular outside of the factions of the Labor Party. So let's see whether those words end up ringing true. But here was the Premier who absolutely made a decision to quit before being able to become the longest-serving Labor Premier of all time.
It's time for renewal. It's, I have a great deputy in Stephen Miles, and I believe he'll make an excellent Premier.
All right, James. Now, firstly, we have to declare you are the first named candidate for One Nation coming into this Queensland election. Don't go into the spiel, but just tell us where you're going to be running. And then the follow-up question is, does it matter who the Premier is?
Paul, thank you. Yes, I am running for the Central Queensland seat of of Keppel. Geez, I better get that right. I'm on the Capricorn coast, but I am running for the seat of Keppel. And look, it is, geez, number one fumble. You can put that on record. Look, the big issue in this state is Labor have done their dash with this state, and it does not matter who is in charge. Look, Anastasia Palaszczuk has left. We know she's left the building. We know that Stephen Miles is likely to replace her. The reality is this is a government that have spending beyond their own means. They've got a beer budget, yet they've got this champagne lifestyle, and it's all at our expense. You know, we've got overruns of billions of dollars in trains. We've got overruns in these so-called Olympics projects that were set to run neutral, cost neutral. Now, we've got a stadium that was supposed to be $1 billion. Now it's blown out to $2.7 billion. Anyone would think this state has been run by Frank Spencer, to be quite honest, because every time there's a blunder in spending, they go, oh, whoopsie, whoopsie, or they try and hide it. Enough. You know, we've got to get a change in this state. No more Frank Spencers. Let's get rid of Labor, and with One Nation's help, I'm quite confident we can get a change come October 26 next year.
Good luck. James Ashby, who'll be on the show next year while running for the seat of Keppel in the Queensland Parliament. Now, Holly, you're fluent in poly speak, just as am I. Nick, you're fluent in it as well. Did she jump or was she pushed? Because my suggestion is she wanted to stay. She wasn't going to go at the next election, but she wanted to beat Peter Beattie. She now won't beat Peter Beattie, and that's why we got the blub on Sunday. What do you reckon, Senator?
Absolutely. She was completely pushed out the door. She was told enough is enough. If you don't go, we're going to start putting the numbers against you. I think the endorsement of Stephen Miles, now I'm not a Queenslander, but I certainly saw the Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders and the ridiculous bollards put up in Tweed. I think if the rest of Australia looks at Queensland and Stephen Miles and his complete capitulation or going along with Anastasia and the cruelness that she displayed to people that needed, particularly on those border towns. Remember, there was that mum that wasn't allowed to go with her premature baby to hospital because it was over from Tweed to Coolangatta. Stephen Miles is just the next personification of her incompetence over that time. And to your point, James, I think Stephen Miles being appointed the next Premier, he will be a very short-lived Premier and will assist in Labor getting the boot in Queensland.
OK, now just about that point again, believe it or not, it was a far right-wing website that reported that very story. Oh, that's right, it was the Turnbull Times. This, of course, back from 2020. Now, I spoke about this in great length last night, about how rageful, how offensive, how disgusting that situation was. A woman lost one of her babies, lost one of her damn babies because of the garbage that was put in place and championed, of course, in part by Stephen Miles.
Mhm.
Now, I've
He
got
was the
Nigel
health
Farage standing
minister.
by. I'm going to get to it in a second. So, correct. So, Nicholas, give me 30 seconds here. You've seen the transition, of course, from John Brumby, other premiers, all the rest of it, right? Now, of course, Anna Bligh was able to go on and win an election after replacing Peter Beattie, who had to go. How important is who they pick as opposed to the fact that whoever the drag on the ticket was has gone out the door?
Look, obviously it's a very important pick. I mean, the leader of the team is a pretty key factor when people make a decision about how they're going to vote. And isn't it a good thing that Queensland Labor have got three pretty outstanding people to choose from in Stephen Miles, Shannon Fenton and Cameron Dick? And so, look, there's the usual political jostling going on. You'd expect to see that. The factional, Queensland's divided between left, right and the old guard. Sitting here tonight, I can't tell you which way the numbers are going to fall, but you'd have to say Stephen Miles is in the box seat. And look, for him, the challenge will be trying to move the government on from some of the issues which had been challenging for the Palaszczuk government, showing that he's got, a fresh agenda and fresh legs and ready to take them into the future at the next election.
Can we just
The
maybe
one thing I
make
think we can all
note
guarantee, Cameron Dick will be the next Deputy Premier of Queensland. All right,
Could we just-
stand by, guys. Sorry for the lack of... Yeah, go for it, Holly.
I was just going to say, if this was a Liberal Premier resigning, we'd have all the headlines in the country. A woman about to be replaced with a man. The Liberals are bad with women. But, no one seems to care when it's a man about to replace a woman in the Labor Party.
It is funny about that. All right, guys, hold your fire. We'll come back to you in a couple of minutes' time. Nigel Farage joins us right now from the beautiful state of Queensland, the Gold Coast to be specific, because he's come out of the jungle. It's been too long. Now, I thought you were going to come out with a beard like mine, but alas, you've spent what? Look how thin you are, by the way. Crocky, how much did you lose, mate?
Only 3 kilograms. And that's because I lost fat and put on muscle. Because I tell you what, in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, you have to carry firewood, you have to carry water. And 3 weeks, 23 nights I was in there, no tea, no coffee, no grog. I mean, it's the biggest detox I've ever been on. I've lost about 10 years, I think, in my appearance. I'm feeling fitter and stronger than ever before.
You look great. Now, I love the moment where you were able to I don't think they'll pay me £1.5 million, but if you could put a word in for me, that'd be great. Now, let's talk here about, I love the moment when you got to reunite with your daughter, and there was a whole conversation that was happening in the UK while you were in there about how stoic you were, and there were all these other people sort of blowing up that you weren't emotional enough. Like, stiff upper lip, and there's a camera there, right? You're not about to go blubbing. But I wanted to ask you this. As a man who is obviously very aware of television, the joy of television, very clever to go and talk to a whole bunch of people who normally wouldn't see you on, say, GB News or see you on the internet, and they would start to hear a different message. And we know younger people are actually quite open to the message that we talk about. And frankly, the conversation we have is the new punk. It's the countercultural right now. But of all of those things, how conscious are you about the camera? And did you know when moments are happening in the jungle, that's going to be the big one on tomorrow night's show?
Well, look, I mean, I was being filmed 24/7. Literally 24/7, there were cameras on me. What I did for trials, whether it was being, locked underground with 20 snakes on me, or eating or drinking the most repulsive things you can even imagine, or having 50 rats running around my head, I showed no emotion whatsoever. Maybe I'd have made better television if I'd screamed a bit, but I thought if I externalise fear, I might start to internalise fear. So I went for the old-fashioned British stiff upper lip, expressionless, no emotion, but I did get my shirt off. I did sing I'm too sexy for my shirt. And the story that's really hit the UK newspapers is pictures of my bare backside. Quite why that's become a new media sensation, I have no idea. But I certainly wasn't shy in the jungle.
It was good to see. Now, I'll talk about the politics stuff in a second. But again, people are strategic when they do these shows, and rightly so. And we talked about the fact that there was inevitably going to be a conversation about Brexit or boats or, you know, the type of governments that we have, and people sitting around watching on ITV in the UK, commercial television, they'll start to see stuff that they don't see in other places. But I want to know about if anyone kind of changed you a little bit. Something someone said that maybe you started to take on, okay, that's how you communicate with people of a certain age or a different persuasion, because part of becoming the leader that you have is to be perceptive. So what messages did you get back from the people in the jungle rather than just the conversations you had?
So I was there with 11 people, 2 of them famous sporting celebrities, the other 9 all from the worlds of pop music, soap operas, social media influencers. I was double the age of nearly half the camp that were there, and I came from the other side of the line. I came from politics, current affairs. One thing that I did learn from that group of much younger people is that you somehow need, in the social media conversation with that younger generation, to use a different kind of language. It's almost like tech speak. The kind of vocabulary that we use in everyday life is not what the kids do anymore. The vocabulary is narrowed to such an incredible degree that there is a danger of using words that no one's ever heard of. So KISS, keep it simple, stupid, was reinforced in a really, really big way. But you know what? I reached, by doing this show and by getting to the final, right to the end, I reached millions of people who don't normally engage with politics, don't normally engage with political debate. And I think, to be honest with you, I think I achieved my goal.
I think so too, which brings me to the obvious question that you won't answer, which is, what do you do with this political capital? Are you thinking about going via Team Blue, creating your own team? Because obviously, as you know, while you were in, there was this disgraceful series of U-turns by the Conservative government. I don't know who they're trying to appeal to anymore. But as we've talked about before, first past the post, you've got to go with some strength. So what's next?
Well, look, you know, I mean, I'm a great believer, having spent 20 years working in financial markets, that when a share price is collapsing, you have to wait for the right buying opportunity. I have a feeling that the share price of the British Conservative Party is nowhere near the bottom of this cycle. Rishi Sunak may well lose a vote tomorrow that's virtually a confidence vote. They are headed for electoral disaster next time round. And you know what? They absolutely, thoroughly and totally deserve it. I will, for this moment in time, keep my cards very close to my chest, but never say never.
Good man, and make sure you keep them even closer than normal, because if you don't have a shirt on, we can see where those cards are. Nigel, congratulations on what you did. It was very entertaining. It was awesome to see. Good to see you having a pint with the boys who like to watch this show as well as love you on the GC, and all the best, mate. You look $1 million. So, look, if you want to break the detox tonight, we'll understand.
Gotcha.
Thank you, mate. Nigel Farage there in, of course, not the UK, the GC, the Gold Coast, after I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here in the UK. Quick break, back with more. Back to our panel in a moment here, where, among other things, we're going to talk about how in the UK, the person who is there to represent Australia has decided, nah, Australia Day, not a thing anymore. You don't vote for this stuff, but it just happens. On a second. Welcome back to the Adelaide Man Cave. Joining us, of course, running for the seat of Keppel in Queensland at the upcoming Queensland election is none other than James Ashby. A man who is the Deputy Lord Mayor of Melbourne is Nicholas Rees, and the lady who represents all of New South Wales in the Senate is none other than Holly Hughes. Formal IDs to you all. So, the High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Stephen Smith, the former Defence Minister, the former mate on Albo's campaign bus. Remember, Toto didn't go on that, but does go on the plane? Anyway. Well, he's decided that due to sensitivities, we're not going to do Australia Day on January the 26th, too offensive. Now, Nicholas, you love Australia Day, right? You're a card-carrying lefty, no question about it, but you love Australia Day. So I'm going to start with you. Why is this happening?
Well, look, I do love Australia Day, actually, Paul, because I love Australia. And I think we need to have a day where we can holler from the rooftops our love of the greatest country in the world No question about it. I also happen to think that we should change the date of Australia Day, and I think it's not beyond our ability to find a new date which we can all agree on and celebrate it on that day. Having said that, the current Parliament of Australia, the Commonwealth Parliament of Australia, has decreed that the 26th of January is the day, and so while that is the designated day for celebration, I do think that that's when those celebrations should occur. And look, if you want to do something to acknowledge certain dark chapters in Australia's history, including the challenges for Aboriginal Australia with the time of European invasion, then I think that's okay as well. So look, I do wonder what was going on here with the decision not to allow some sort of event to occur on the 26th of January in the UK.
Nicholas, you are going to go far. We all know he's going to go far for a whole bunch of different reasons. But Holly, I love Australia Day, but move the day. Could be one of my favourites out of Nicholas's mouth I've ever heard. I love him.
Oh, please. And Stephen Smith, if anyone hasn't pointed out, he's the High Commissioner to the UK. They've got a little bit of a connection to that date as well. When the settlement of Australia occurred, when the First Fleet arrived, the settlement of Australia in conjunction with the UK, who we still are part of a constitutional monarchy with. I mean, the lefties might want to go ahead with their woke agenda, just changing things willy-nilly as they please, but it is actually not up to them. And the Australian people have overwhelmingly still decided that the 26th of January is Australia Day. And it is certainly well out of the purview of Stephen Smith to go and sort out this sort of decrees that he now thinks he's empowered to do so. So whether it's Penny Wong or Albanese that needs to get on the phone to him, it needs to happen and happen quickly. This is absolutely embarrassing. It is well outside of what his responsibilities are. And quite frankly, these ideological zealots should keep their beliefs in their pocket and respect the democracy that is Australia and the views of Australian citizens.
I'm with you. All right, James, again, it's one of those frustrations where if Australians ever get the chance to vote on this, OK, that's the time to muck around with this stuff. Slowly but surely trying to sort of snuff out the eternal flame of pride in your own country is a pretty nasty thing to be being done, especially by somebody who's outside the country representing it.
Nicholas started so well and then he tanked when he said he wanted to change the date. Paul, we just recently had that vote. We actually had the vote when we did the Voice to Parliament. The referendum clearly stated Australians do not want this divide anymore. And for the majority of Australians, we actually love Australia Day. We celebrate it. It should remain the same day, 26th of January next year. Thank God the Voice didn't get up. There are people in their lounge rooms now. You can all thank that it didn't get up, because I can tell you, not only would the High Commission of Britain or England not be celebrating, but the rest of us here in Australia would also not be celebrating if that voice was successful. So thank goodness for that. This is just another failed test of Anthony Albanese. He's got no control of these people. He rewards by putting them in these high positions in overseas places. So, sorry, you can't come back from that, Nick.
Well, I'm sorry, James. You can't go and claim overreach on that scale you just did. I mean, the fact that the referendum went down, the vote went down on the earlier this year does not lead to a mandate for your entire crazy right-wing agenda, OK?
Oh, hello. So you've just called every Australian who celebrates Australia Day.
We should have a day to celebrate it, but we just want to make it a different day than the 26th of January.
Well done.
Give him a clap, everyone.
All right, thank you, guys. We're out of time. Merry Christmas to everyone, by the way. We'll see you all again next year. All right, Brady Bunch, love you, love you, love you. Have a great time with your family. All right, quick break. Back with more here on Paul Murray Live. That's our show for tonight. In Adelaide, we're back at the Man Cave proper tomorrow. Happy birthday to beautiful Taylor. Not Swift, but the one who helps make this show. Here's the late debate.